Thank you, Pradeep, for joining XROM-Podcast, India's first AR/VR podcast. Really appreciate you taking time. Brief introduction about you to my audience. Mr. Khanna is the CEO of Global Mindset. He's been an adjunct professor and advisory board member in Australia, Singapore, and India. He's a member of IEEE Global Immersive Learning Global Group, and he's also the executive director, Asia Pacific, Sydney president, and global co-chair education for VRARA, the organization I believe which is making the most noise at this point in time, building a community and pushing the AR/VR ecosystem forward. And that's the need of the day, because AR/VR/MR is the technology which I believe in the next couple of days is going to transform mankind in ways unfathomable, right? So to the audience who don't know much about you, can you please share details about where you started, about your consulting firm Global Mindset, and what got you interested in immersive technology?
I am at the moment very passionately involved in immersive technologies, which is VR, AR, and there's a whole range of different taxonomies, calling it extended reality, but coming back and looking at where I am at the moment, I have three main areas of focus. One is from VR AR association perspective, I am the executive director Asia Pacific, as well as Sydney president, as well as global co-chair education. Now, VR AR association, also known by the acronym VRARA, is the largest VR AR focused association in the world, with 70 plus chapters, with 4,400 plus entities registered with it, and a community of tens of thousands of people. We are building a huge global ecosystem, and anything to do with VR AR, we normally tend to be the first point of call. This is where is one part of my role in terms of building a huge community, building a network of people, building a repository of tools and tackles and resources, doing environmental scans, as well as looking at good practice papers, lessons learned, expanding the list of use cases, how to make use cases to business cases, and so on and so forth. My second role is with IEEE, where as part of a global group, I am not only involved in looking at doing environmental scans of who's doing what, but also initiating discussions on standards, also to get the debate between open source and proprietary technology. My third role is with Global Mindset, a company that I started a couple of years back. And we are working to create a marketplace. And why a marketplace? Because when I look at what is happening in the ecosystem, I find that most of the big companies of the world are putting in billions and billions of dollars into immersive technologies. But when I look at the content side of the ecosystem, we have all startups. One person, 5 people, 25, 35 means they are big, I've met companies also with headcounts of 100 to 300, but they are outliers. So nobody knows whether these companies are good, bad, or ugly. And an information asymmetry market, it's an imperfect market, being an emerging market. And to that extent, when I speak at conferences all over the world, as in 2019, I was invited to present at 27 international conferences. And when speaking at these conferences, I find that there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of noise about immersive technology. But on an average, 70% of the audience is still trying to figure out what is the difference between VR and AR. And to my mind, that clearly shows that on one hand, the demand side is still trying to understand the use cases. And the supply side, especially on the content, has got so many small companies that the need for marketplace is very, very important. Now, keeping this in mind is where we are looking at number one, building a community, helping do an environmental scan, set standards, get the debate between open source and proprietary, and help create a marketplace. It's a journey that we are on, and obviously it will take time. So the first question that I'm asked at these conferences or anywhere that I'm there is, has the tipping point arrived? And my answer is no, we are not at the tipping point at this particular point in time. We are still about 2 to 3 years away. So this is some sort of an idea as to what I'm doing and how deeply I'm involved into the immersive technologies. And back
Right.
to you, Eddie.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think most of the companies who are vested in immersive technology are on a journey because the reason they're on a journey because they understand the impact of this technology. They understand what this technology can do to mankind, businesses, education, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the reason, I mean, when you said, yes, I mean, Facebook is on a journey, Magic Leap is on a journey, HTC is on a journey, Microsoft is on a journey, trying to build the capabilities of the hardware, softwares that can accelerate this technology. Yes, it's in a nascent stage. That's the reason we have these problems. And that's the reason we, most importantly, we need people like you who are building a community, because you said you go outside the community, nobody knows what AR, VR, MR is or the distinction between those technologies. So there is more and more need for people like you, groups like yourself, to raise awareness about this technology and make the common people understand that this technology can push drive the conversation of everything. With AR, VR, once it comes in the fore, all your 2D medium will die out. Your screen will be your wall, it'll be your, wherever you look at could be the screen, and all the data will be collected, and you'll, from your being restricted to the 2D medium, you'll jump into the 3D world where everything will be interactive. And that's the power and potent of AR, VR, MR. You being in the education space, can you shine light on how it's going to impact the education industry, and where are we at this point in time?
So, before I answer the question in regard to education, I think it's important to realize that VR, AR have been around for last 25 years. The challenge with any emerging technology is if you are too early in the game, then you get tired of waiting. If you're too late, then you've missed the bus. So the timing part of it becomes extremely important, and later in the discussion, I will dwell more on that. But you asked me about how is immersive technologies impacting education, and I would take the broad sector consisting of education and training. Now, education and training consists of 6 different sectors or subsegments. It has early childhood learning, it has K to 12, which are schools, it has higher education, it has vocational training, it has college learning, and it has lifelong learning. So there are clear 2 buckets, which is one is in terms of skills training and second is in terms of education. And then you've got early childhood learning, which is kind of oscillating in between these buckets in a niche of its own. Now, how is immersive technologies impacting these segments? They essentially impact these segments in 4 to 5 different ways. One is in blending with pedagogy. And when we say blending with pedagogy means that how one is teaching or how students are learning in any of these segments using immersive technology. Number two is in doing research in the application of immersive technologies. And it does not necessarily mean from a technology perspective, but in different use cases. In other words, what are the data points that we are collecting when immersive technologies are being used in any form? Number three is to set up a studio or a lab. Number four is to conduct teaching in immersive technologies, stuff like Unity, 3D modeling, UX, UI. And number five is in teacher professional development. So these are the five areas that we see how immersive technologies are impacting. And the application varies, VR to AR. Now, the whole concept of VR and AR, there is a whole lot of taxonomy issues in terms of, how do they fit in with mixed reality? How do they fit in the extended reality? So, to my mind, I go back especially to the example of learning and teaching, that at one end, you've got face-to-face learning, which is equal to the real world. On the other hand, you've got a fully online environment, which is equal to the virtual world. The in-between space as you travel from face-to-face classes or learning to online learning environment is called blended learning. Now, what is blended learning? It is some combination of real and online learning. Likewise, on one hand, you've got the real world. On the other hand, you've got the virtual reality or the virtual world. And in between space is called mixed reality, which is some combination of the real and the virtual world. And augmented reality is just one point of this spectrum. So how these are getting applied to education and training, there are n number of ways. What we are finding to a certain extent in some countries, VR is more dominant. We're also finding that in countries like India, for instance, especially in the K to 12 space, AR is somehow more popular. So you've got different variances floating around.
Yeah. So you said face-to-face, real-world learning and online learning, and the mixture of two, like a blended learning. So what are your views on exactly the same, the brick and mortar or the traditional or the online education system? Like for example, the music industry business, right? Some 20 years back, now those CDs or LPs used to be minimum between 12 to 15 US dollars, right? And the big record label executives, the producers or the managers in between, used to scam the shit out of the artists, right? Then internet happened and it changed the dynamics completely, right? So the music started getting digitized. Today, the same thing which was available per CD, which was around 12 to $15, has come down to almost free. But that does not mean that it's impacted the music industry. People, the musicians are still making money. They're finding more innovative ways to make money. Like, for example, they're doing more live gigs. They are investing on being better musicians so they can produce well, and they can still make money out of selling the music online. But it's become more competitive. Do you think the same thing is happening to the education space at this point in time? Because the brick and mortar education systems at this point in time are charging a bomb. They're really expensive. They're draining the parents and the students with education loan, and at the same time you have massive open online courses which are giving you education for almost free or close to free. How do you see this impacting the education industry? Will the same thing play out, what I said about the music industry in the education space?
One of the challenges of disruption in the education space is that credentialing bodies or the power to credential is still being controlled by the universities. Now, that in effect is the key element. because whatever you do, end of the day, it comes down to what is the value proposition of a degree. And if I were to put it into the Indian context, you see, if you have a degree from IITs or IIMs, it has a different standing as compared to a degree from any other institution. If, for example, every private institution had or was able to issue a credential, then we would have a different marketplace altogether. Now, I am seeing in places like Australia, etc., the entire value proposition of a higher education is being coming into question because people are having different kind of career paths. You could either, have your own startup. You could either go for vocational education and training. You could either go for a higher education degree. You could either start working at a very, very early on in life. The barriers to entry are coming down with rapid access to technology, etc. So very often as we are also living in a lifelong learning environment where whatever we learn at the university or at our primary institution will maybe become irrelevant after a certain point in time. Maybe we'll have to reskill ourselves. Maybe we will have to rechange our jobs maybe 5 or 6 times during a lifetime. So how best do we do that? So we will do it in a blended manner of face to face and online, purely because our convenience, our cost parameters will really decide what path we take. Now, how long this journey is going to be in terms of democratizing, there's so many forces at play. But one of the critical elements which is there is in terms of who are the bodies which are issuing credentials. You see, in spite of the fact that MOOCs have been around since 2000 and actually from 2007, but they exploded into attention when Coursera and edX, they gave it a boost, and the year 2013 was called the year of the MOOCs. But 2014, when people saw that the completion rates were so low and there was such high number of dropouts, 2014 was called the year of the backlash against the MOOCs. Today, where we are, is in a situation where there are more than 4,000 MOOCs all over the world. Now, in that kind of environment, the question still remains that can I get a qualification or a degree by doing a subject A from MOOC A, by doing subject B from MOOC B? Can I add all of these and make a composite degree? Now, maybe you can, maybe you cannot. This is still not in the very easy basket which is accessible for everybody else. For the ordinary person, depending on the kind of economic and the business and the political environment that they are operating in, sometimes having a university degree may be the only way to get into the labor market. Not for anything else, but because the competition for the jobs is so high that one of the parameters they do testing could only as to how good or bad his marks are. Whether that is relevant or not is another question. So to answer your question, it is definitely happening, but the pace of change in education and education training is much, much faster, is much slower as compared to what is happening in, say, music, etc. Because there were no regulatory barriers to that extent. Yes, there were issues in regard to in the music industry about IP, etc. But They were not, the powers of issuing credentials and so on and so forth.
The only reason we invest in younger generation for the education space is because so we can prime them for the labor market, right? And you said the value proposition of a degree or a credit your certificate. Now those I think are now dying out because there are firms, such as big. Even Elon Musk, I think, made a statement where he said that he's no longer looking at degrees. He's looking at somebody who's talented and who has a desire to innovate and build something cool. So if I'm very excited for the future of the education industry because it looks so awesome. And I believe that AR, VR, artificial intelligence will further accelerate the conversation of personalized learning, where you don't really need to get into a classroom with fill of 50 students and just one teacher. Here you will be strapped onto a headset. There'll be one teacher for each and every student. So I'm very excited for that future. So tell me, how do you see COVID-19 impacting not just the education industry, but the entire the other business sectors also? Because this natural calamity has confined all of us to our homes. Now small businesses, big businesses, all have been affected. So has been the student community, right? There's a psychological impact on them. Like the graduating students, they don't really know what to do. Where's the jobs, what's happening? I mean, so what are your views on that?
So what COVID-19 has done is it is enabling a very, very rapid take-up of technology and virtual collaboration at an unprecedented pace. And the challenge is that we are witnessing or will be seeing, waves of lockdowns, partial openings, partial again lockdowns, again partial openings, till such time a vaccine comes about. And the earliest timelines that we are looking at for, what I'm hearing is potentially maybe September this year to sometime, early 2021. But what that means is that we'll be operating into these kind of environments. We would have been operating for at least about 6 months plus. Now, that is fundamentally changing the way we adopt technology. I am seeing people who did not even know that there's something called Zoom existing before. They are happily zooming away. So there is a very, very big impact that we are going to witness in the short term, medium term, and in the long term. And I will give you one example of the two forces at play. One is that, yes, while there is massive take up of technology happening, but at the same time, the steep downward trend in the economy that we are seeing worldwide also means that the capital which is available for investing into emerging technology is also becoming more risk averse. Just as an example, one of the prime companies in immersive technology space, Magic Leap, laid off 50% of its staff a couple of weeks back, and also moved its focus from consumer to enterprise. That is an aspect of technology takeoff which is happening. So on one side, we are seeing that the demand side is having a wide spread take up. On the supply side, we are seeing because of the downturn, there is cutback or more risk aversion happening. And somewhere along the two, some balance is being kind of, taking place in the short term. But medium to long term, COVID has had a very, very positive aspect in terms of both technology and emerging technology. This is how I would summarize. In the short term, there could be plays which are leading to maybe some backward steps, but I think the medium to long term steps are very, very definitely strengthened. Now, herein comes also the question that what kind of a technology are we talking about? Because let's look at virtual reality. Now, virtual reality requires a head-mounted device. Now, people who have a device have it. People who don't have a device, it is very difficult for them to get one in the COVID environment. So, while there is, good take up happening of immersive technology, but in virtual reality, one is not going to see too much of wide expansion of the number of people taking it, purely because people cannot access. And there are very few people to kind of help them learn the process. On the other hand, when you look at augmented reality, especially the mobile phone driven augmented reality, that is definitely getting a boost even during the COVID times. So it's a mixed bag, and depending on the kind of technology, kind of application. But like I said, these are short-term impacts. The medium to long term are definitely very, very pro technology.
Yes, I think I'm completely with you. I mean, AR is the way to go, and the impact has been completely mixed because VR is the technology which has got all those capabilities packaged inside to push drive the conversation when it comes to remote work, remote healthcare, remote education, or whatever. But somehow, I feel personally, it's my opinion, I feel that we have missed that opportunity, and it's still gone back to the 2D platform, right? I mean, 2D platform, this is what we can do. It's about you sitting somewhere else, and there's you with VR you can feel that person. I can have an avatar, you can have an avatar, we can meet each other, talk and stuff like that. And there's so much one can do, not just in meeting but with work and education, so and so forth. But yes, I mean, yes, the drawbacks with VR has been the price points, the hardware issues and things like that. And I guess that's the reason I think we missed the opportunity, and Zoom and other platforms have capitalized on it. So, but largely, I think it's a positive impact. People are getting to know about this technology and what it can do. So tell me, you are the executive director Asia Pacific at VR ARA. You are also doing your yearly event. You're taking it onto the online platform. Now the event industry has been impacted in a big way. Last I spoke to Lauren Cretin from the Laval virtual, and he had to actually also move his physical event on the virtual platform. But 13,000 people have attended the event over the 2 days. The 6,000 avatars were created. So do you see an opportunity over there? And so that at least the event side, which they believe at this point in time, that the physical event side, which has been badly impacted, the live event, so the online platform could be just a ray of hope. So please do talk about your event on June that you're doing, and what's your future plan for push driving the ecosystem for AR VR here in India and Asia.
So, we are invited to partner with hundreds of conferences and to present our thought leading perspectives. But we have, as VR AR Association, three face to face global summits. They happen, one in Vancouver, second in partnership with LiveWorks in Boston, and number three in Lisbon. And I am planning one Pan India as well as one Pan Asia Pacific summit in 2021. Now, the event that we are happening in the month of June is actually the Lisbon event, which used to happen face to face, but because of the COVID environment, it's going to be online. Now, you look at the scale of present at the moment, it is possibly going to be the largest VR AR focused online event in the world. There are easily more than 10,000 plus people attending. It is being presented in three time zones, which is North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And this is the first time that I have been pushing very hard to, get Asia Pacific time zones also, because when you look at the time difference between Sydney and San Francisco, it is 17 hours, which means that if somebody has to be actively involved, then it really becomes very difficult. They have to get up in the middle of the night to kind of take part in calls, etc. You can do it once, but you can't do it all the time. So what we are doing is that we are presenting content from all the three at three time zones, but it's all rolled into one, which means that the global audience has an opportunity to attend content anywhere. So we are also having a whole lot of virtual booths and all. I mean, it's going to be an experience by itself. There is a phenomenal amount of interest which is happening. But yes, I mean, I always wonder. I've been asked this question so many times in the recent past during COVID days. that how is an online event different from a face-to-face event? And the reality is that there is no, you know, I mean, you really cannot just make an online experience that great as really compared to a face-to-face event. So in future, I see that yes, technology will play a big role, but you'll have the entire range of events happening at different price points and different experience points. And it's really up to the audience as to what they want to go for. In regard to our June event at the moment, there are great themes which are at play. It is running over 3 days, and it's a fabulous opportunity for people to get exposed to immersive technologies. Attending the event is free, and if somebody wants to take part in, say, speed dating or in premium access, there is a small fee to be paid for. But absolutely, people can attend free of cost for this event.
Lovely, lovely. So I will obviously share the details, so if my listeners want to attend, they can get online. So in India, we have close to around 200 AR/VR MR startups, but the funding, the ecosystem has been very, very slow. Only a handful of those AR/VR startups have got some kind of funding. The enterprise seems to be adopting AR/VR, but things have been quite slow. Is VR, AR, AA actively doing something to push drive the ecosystem here in India?
So, from my perspective as looking after Asia Pacific, the situation is we've got two biggies, India and China, and then we've got a whole lot of countries with different size of the economy as well as populations. And obviously, me having come from India, in the Indian market is extremely important for us. I was in India in the month of January, and we launched chapters in Ahmedabad and Pune. Currently, we are relaunching Bangalore and Chennai. There is work happening in opening chapters in Chandigarh, relaunch of New Delhi. So there's a lot of activity happening. When we are building a community, it is not just getting together a group of developers or solution providers. For us, the community means it has to be from demand, supply, industry, academia, and different stakeholder groups. That, in our view, is the best way to get the ecosystem up and running. We are seeing in each of these places a very, very high level of demand. And just as a point to tell you as to the nature of the industry, there are about 2,500 entities in India alone which are into VR AR. I personally know about 600 to 700, but this number keeps rising every day as more and more companies get in touch with us. For where you talked about the funding aspect in the conference in June, I have actually curated sessions, out of which two sessions are devoted to startups. One session is looking at what is the VC and angel investors' perspective in regard to emerging technologies as well as immersive technologies. Number two is also looking at an entrepreneur's journey as to people or successful people who have undertaken journeys into VR, AR. What has been the drivers? And to my mind, the challenge at this particular point in time, apart from technology kind of issues, is more on the demand side. So the more involvement, you see, what has been happening is that a lot of discussions are happening at technology level. If I were to say, talk to you and say that, oh man, there is 6 degrees of freedom. I mean, if I took simply look at it from a business or a personal perspective, it doesn't mean a damn to me.
Yeah.
Do I really care about 6 degrees of freedom? Now, the question is that we have to take the focus away from technology and we have to focus on personal experience or what business problem that we are trying to solve. At the end of the day, nobody's really interested in VR, AR, or IoT solution. They are interested in how their life is becoming easier, how their business problem, etc., is being, addressed. Now, I know thousands of companies all over the world. When I I'm interacting with these people in the VR AR space, I find that 60% of them are coming with a technology background, 20% of them are coming from film production background, 20% of them remaining are coming from some other backgrounds. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do is get, fuse together the experience, the business side with the energy and the technology knowledge of the youngsters, but looking at it from a business perspective, from the demand perspective, rather than focusing on to technology. That will also help in getting higher level of funding into these immersive technologies. But as I kind of walk around to people, I also surprised that funding is not that much of an issue as it is in terms of showcasing what is the business value that it is there. When I compare the situation when I was living in India and what it is now, it's a very different ballgame altogether. So I think the key lies in terms of, you know, how do we kind of communicate the business value in a language to business that business understands.
Right.
That in a sense, that in a sense will not only help getting more demand side involved into immersive technology, but it will also help in flowing of higher amounts of funding into the sector. And to my mind, the roadmap is coming very clear, as to how different emerging technologies are coming together. And um, you see, the challenge, like I said earlier, was in emerging technologies is that if you are too early, then you are waiting for it to happen, and if you're too late, then the opportunity is missed. And of course, it's very good. And I always tell people to follow their passion, but the challenge always remains is that who pays the bills when you follow the passion? So striking the right balance, getting a higher level of business focus, talking the language of the business is, and getting together an ecosystem from all different stakeholder groups is, I think, almost critical. And this is what we are doing. And we're getting absolutely tremendous traction. I mean, when we had the launch events in Ahmedabad and Pune, we had leaders, more than 50 leaders from different part of the, stakeholder groups that I've talked about attending. We've got universities as members in India. We've got billion-dollar subsidiaries, of larger companies as members. We've got startups as members. There's a huge amount of interest which is happening. But that is not because, it's not about membership. It has to be much bigger than that in terms of what is the value proposition that each person is looking for. The reality is that in immersive technologies and emerging technologies, nobody knows what is happening. There are no standards at this particular point in time. It's a bit like the Wild West. So when you are operating outside the community, you are kind of isolated. You do not know that what you are looking for, your passion, what is the real validation of that. So it's extremely important to be part of the community and to be who's what in different parts of the world. We are partnering with Korea VRR Association purely because the government in Korea wants their companies to go out and get into international business, and they want an international network to leverage. We are happy with that. It's a great kind of arrangement. So similar kind of things we are being approached by some entities and state governments wanting our help to kind of set up the ecosystem by universities. There's tons happening.
Right.
Tons.
Right. I think Pradeep, you summarize it beautifully. As a startup, I mean, you need to first find a business value. The business perspective needs to be in place, and most importantly, you have to create a demand. You have to build an ecosystem. If the ecosystem is not there, there's no demand. I mean, nothing's gonna move, right? So yes, I mean, in small ways, I've been doing the same thing since 2016 when I set up my virtual reality content studio back in early 2016. I directed, produced, produce India's first stereoscopic VR horror short film. We built a 18 camera rig. We built our own robotic dolly, and we produced this VR short film, which has got the best VR experience award at the Miami Fear Fest. But then I realized, what next? I mean, because there was no ecosystem. There was no uh, there was no way to sustain, right? So that's the reason I came up with the idea of building an ecosystem, and that's when I put together Immersion VR Fest, India's first VR film festival and conference. From there, it's been a journey. I moved on to XROM news magazine, then XR Bazaar is it, because it's there to solve the accessibility problem, because we do not have hardwares over here. So that's where I come in, and now I provide. So yes, it's about building a community, creating a demand, and VRARA is doing a fantastic job. And I would tell my listeners, if there's any startups, developers, content creators, or enterprise, whoever wants to understand AR VR MR, or wants to grow the company, or as an individual, when it comes to AR VR MR, please connect with Mr. Pradeep Khanna, because I will put down all the details down below, because this is about building a community and push driving the ecosystem, and that's the only way that this will go. So tell me, what comes next for Mr. Khanna, and what comes next for VRARA?
So, from my perspective, as I look at it, I see this huge window of opportunity in the next 2 to 3 years, because we are in that sweet spot today where the tipping point looks like happening in the next 2 to 3 years. So when it is, a technology which has been around for last 2 3 years, heading towards a tipping point in the next 2 to 3 years, there is a great window of opportunity to be part of this, whole change which is going to be happening, and not only be a part of the change, but enable change happening across at a individual level, at an enterprise level, at a country level. And how best do we leverage that? So I am living in a twilight zone, like I was mentioning to you early. I have also a very, very high regard for you, as I see the kind of work that you're doing, in building up the communities and in thought leadership. And to my mind, there is nothing like, a community of VRARA, or, your community or X community and all that. End of the day, we are all working towards the same goal. And to my mind, this is a great opportunity to be, witnessing this change. And why, and there are a whole lot of reasons, and I can develop out another time, is why I see this happening in the next 2 to 3 years and over the next 7 to 8 years. Also because I see what is happening. Because we are always being approached by entities all over the world, so there is a lot of proprietary information one is aware of in terms of what is happening in different parts of the world, which gives us the confidence to say that yes, we are at the moment in the sweet spot. Although, even though the revenue may be difficult for companies to get for the next 2 to 3 years, but they need to focus on establishing their brand in terms of getting more POCs out in the front place, and so on and so forth. So I am very deeply immersed into it. I don't even kind of think what is happening, and there is so much happening that it's difficult for one to even keep track of.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you, Pradeep, for being part of XRO podcast and sharing your insight. Like you said, yeah, even I'm pretty much gungo about AR, VR, MR, and right, you said it's in the sweet spot at this point in time. And somehow this natural disaster of COVID-19 could just be one factor which could accelerate the immersive technology forward. So thank you for being part of XRO podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. And like always, I'm going to leave behind all the details of my guest, Mr. Khanna, down below, so that you can reach out, get in touch. And like I said, this is about building a community and growing the ecosystem forward, because AR, VR, MR is going to be transformational, and we need to start right now. And this is the sweet spot. Get into it, push drive the conversation, grow the ecosystem. And yeah, I mean, we are all here to help, right? So thank you, Mr. Khanna. Really appreciate
Guys, thank you very much, Eddie, for having me. I really enjoyed, talking to you. And to my mind, it is, passion driving passion, and how we, identify the jewels, because these are the ones which will kind of lift the overall system, or the ecosystem.
Right.
Thank you once again. Lovely enjoyed it. Take
Thank you.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. And my last ending note: passion drives passion, and I can see the passion. I can take the passion from you, because even at your age, you're so passionate about it. And you say you're living in the twilight zone, and you've gone to 27 countries. I think all the younger people wake up and get inspired. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Freddy. Take care. Bye.